Imagine a dense, mist-covered forest where ancient stories whisper on the wind. This is where our true journey into the figure of Robin Hood begins, far beyond the simplistic and popular caricature fed to us through songs, movies, and even school lessons. Robin Hood was not just a common outlaw or a generic hero robbing from the rich to give to the poor. The reality is far more complex, deeply rooted in the political and social struggles that shaped medieval England. To begin, we must place this character within his true historical context. Robin Hood was likely a nobleman, possibly Sir Robert Fitzooth, a man of noble blood forced into resistance against the oppressive government embodied by King John Lackland and his local representative, the corrupt Sheriff of Nottingham. This is not mere speculation. Renowned historians such as J.C. Holt, in his classic work Robin Hood, 1982, and medieval scholar Stephen Knight, author of Robin Hood, A Complete Study of the English Outlaw, 1994, argued that the legendary figure was distorted for centuries, his noble essence and legitimate fight for justice replaced by a simplified fable for popular consumption. Contrary to popular culture's narrative, Robin Hood was not a social vigilante seeking simple wealth redistribution. He was a defender of traditional feudal justice, fighting to uphold noble rights and privileges against the authoritarian and corrupt regime that violated ancient laws and usurped rightful properties. King John, who reigned from 1199 to 1216, is infamous in history as a tyrannical ruler, known for greed, heavy taxation, and legal manipulation to serve his political agenda. Meanwhile, the Sheriff of Nottingham symbolizes corruption, notorious for abuse and real theft from both common folk and local nobility. Far from the image of a hero stealing from the rich, Robin Hood and his band of merry men were not ordinary thieves but warriors and strategists combating institutional injustice and seeking to preserve the balance of power within the era's accepted rules. This perspective gains further strength when examining medieval documents and ballads, where Robin is frequently called an outlaw, not in a criminal sense but politically, as a rebel against illegitimate power rather than a mere criminal. J.C. Holt's interpretation, supported by other scholars, emphasizes that the legend was romanticized and simplified, especially from the 16th century onward, when social and political tensions in England popularized the idea of a people's hero against an oppressive aristocracy. Yet this narrative has little to do with the Robin Hood who roamed the shadows of the 12th century forests. Instead, he represented the barons' and nobles' resistance to the excessive and authoritarian centralization of power embodied by King John and his corrupt sheriff. This fight was not merely for land or gold, but for the preservation of justice and feudal rights that upheld the social structure of the time. In other words, while modern audiences view Robin Hood as a symbol of progressive social justice, historical reality shows a man defending a medieval power system, albeit a just one, against the abuses of a ruler who became the archetype of the corrupt despot. Over centuries, Robin Hood's figure has been adapted, retold, and often distorted to meet the cultural and political needs of each era, from chivalric romance to political propaganda, culminating in the Hollywood films and children's tales we know today. Yet the historical truth remains crucial to understanding that Robin Hood was not a simple thief, but a legitimate nobleman, a warrior fighting tyranny and corruption, a true resistance against the despot King John and his unjust sheriff. This is the Robin Hood we must celebrate, a symbol of the fight for law, justice, and honor in dark times, not a simplified thief of the people character. As historian J.C. Holt reminds us, the true legend of Robin Hood lies in his complexity as a historical figure who challenged oppressive power, not in his reduction to a mere popular bandit. Now that we have unveiled this hidden face, it is clear that the legend is far richer and more fascinating than the version we were told, and this is the story you will bring to your audience, opening their eyes to the true struggle that shaped that era and inspired centuries of resistance against tyranny. As we venture deeper into the shadows of medieval England, it becomes essential to understand the turbulent political landscape that shaped Robin Hood's fight and legacy. The early 13th century was a period marked by intense conflict between the monarchy and the baronial class, a struggle that defined the very concept of justice and governance. King John Lackland, a monarch infamous for his ruthless tactics, failed repeatedly to uphold the traditional rights of the English nobility and common people alike. His reign was characterized by heavy taxation, arbitrary justice, and a blatant disregard for the Magna Carta. The historic charter meant to limit royal authority and protect baronial privileges. Historian Mark Morris, in his acclaimed work, King John, Treachery, Tyranny, and the Road to Magna Carta, 2008, paints a vivid picture of a king whose desperation to consolidate power led to widespread rebellion and social unrest. Robin Hood's opposition to King John was not merely an act of personal defiance, but part of a broader noble resistance seeking to preserve the fragile balance of medieval English society. The outlaw's famous refuge in Sherwood Forest was less about hiding from the law and more about establishing a strategic base from which to challenge the corrupt administration. The Sheriff of Nottingham, often portrayed as a mere villain in folklore, was in reality a royal official tasked with enforcing King John's oppressive policies. Chroniclers like Roger of Wendover and Florus Tistorium describe the sheriff's role in extending royal control through brutal means, often disregarding traditional rights and protections afforded to the populace. Robin Hood's band was composed of loyal followers, many of whom were minor nobles, yeomen, and disenfranchised knightsmen bound not by criminal intent, but by a shared cause to restore justice and rightful order. As historian J.C. Holt highlights, these merry men were more akin to a politically motivated militia than a gang of thieves. Their actions disrupted the illegal exactions imposed by the sheriff and sought to reassert the feudal rights that King John had trampled. Furthermore, the romanticized notion that Robin Hood stole from the rich to give to the poor is a later invention, emerging in ballads centuries after the original tales circulated. The earliest ballads, such as A Jest of Robin Hood, focus more on Robin's defiance of corrupt officials and his commitment to justice for the rightful nobility. This nuance is crucial. Robin Hood was not a champion of egalitarian wealth distribution, but a defender of feudal justice, a concept very different from modern social justice ideals. The context of the Magna Carta Rebellion cannot be overlooked when examining Robin Hood's legend. The barons' revolt against King John culminated in the sealing of this document in 1215, which aimed to curtail the king's absolute authority and protect the rights of the nobility. Robin Hood, as many historians argue, symbolizes this resistance movement. His outlaw status was a political designation, branding him as an enemy of the crown for standing against royal tyranny. It is also worth noting that King John's reputation as a villain is historically well. His loss of Normandy, conflicts with the Pope, and harsh rule plunged England into crisis. Yet in popular imagination, the complexity of this period has been flattened into a simple dichotomy of good Robin Hood versus evil king. This oversimplification does a disservice to understanding the deep-rooted social and political struggles of the time. In sum, the true story of Robin Hood is a narrative of political resistance, loyalty, and a fight to preserve a just order within a medieval framework. It challenges the modern myth of the noble thief and reveals a man and a movement deeply embedded in the fabric of English feudal society, fighting not for radical change, but for the restoration of rightful law and tradition. Subscribe to this channel, like, comment, and share, and don't miss the next videos.